What about people like Leonardo DiCaprio and Taylor Swift, these people that are just constantly on their private jets? So Leonardo is at the forefront of telling us all what we should and shouldn't do in terms of climate change, as he is chartering big luxury mega yachts. He's getting his private jet to his mega yacht, and then he gets his helicopter to land on the helipad to take him out to dinner. Like, this isn't bullshit. This is actually happening. And he actually has the audacity to tell us that we should be limiting our travel.
Welcome to The Wellness Way with me, Philly J. Lay, a layperson's guide to your natural health systems, your very own NHS. Hello, lovely people, and it's a slightly different episode of The Wellness Way today. I'm curled up in my chair with my cup of tea and my Wellness Warrior mug with my dear friend Ellie McKay from the On a Mission podcast. Absolutely brilliant podcast. And I brought Ellie onto the show because she's been a bit of a mentor for me. You know, this is something very new that I've done. You know, I've been going just over a year, and it was completely outside my comfort zone. Going outside your comfort zone is actually a really important part of your health. And we have a saying in our Soma breathwork training, you know, push outside the comfort zone. That's where the magic happens. You know, that's where the change happens. And Ellie and I have both pushed outside the comfort zone, haven't we, Ellie? And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing. We're going to talk about your story because that is, you know, tragic. That was you've been through the mill, but just coming and sharing your expertise with us and inspiring people more than anything, just inspiring people to get off your arse and do something different with your life. You know, we've done it, and it's a bit of a shock, but it's great fun. Ellie McKay, thank you for coming on.
What a kind introduction. I think that might be the kindest introduction I've ever had, really. Thank you.
Well, you know I'm a massive fan of your work, and your generosity in helping me with all of this has been spectacular. And
look how far you've come, by the way. This is incredible. This studio is amazing, and it's really nice to record this in your home environment and see you in your element. We've been out foraging for food, and it's just an absolute pleasure to be here.
We have, since Ellie arrived, we foraged for our tea, we foraged for our supper. We're having a parasol mushroom steak. Okay, it's not a real steak, it's a mushroom. So tell us about, first of all, On a Mission podcast. So you started this, 2 years ago?
3 years ago now.
Is it 3 now?
Yeah. Every downside has an upside, and every upside has a downside. And we were just chatting earlier, weren't we, about COVID, and actually there's so much to be grateful for, because had it not been for the pandemic, one, I wouldn't have started the podcast and connected with amazing people like you, but equally, I wouldn't be having conversations like this and taking accountability for my own health as well. But it was born through boredom, really. I was at home with the 3 kids and the 2 dogs during lockdown, like everyone else. And I am the sort of person that thrives on company, people, whether it's speaking on stage, networking events, masterminds, client meals, seeing friends, you know, anything and everything really. And during that period, as much as I wasn't an avid follower of all the rules, it was quite an isolating time. And as much as I really enjoyed that quality time with the family, there did come a point when I sort of felt like I was losing my identity a little bit. I was just becoming Ellie the mum and not Ellie the businesswoman or Ellie the entrepreneur.
Sorry to interrupt this podcast. Why don't you come and sign up to my newsletter at phillyjlay.com, where we can keep connected. You will also get my free manifestation meditation so you can become a shit-hot manifester too. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share. And turn your notifications on so you never miss an episode. Thank you.
Which actually was a relatively new tag for me. I'd only got into business in 2018, but 2020 all kind of got stripped away, and it was, this is going to sound really, really woo-woo. I don't know if I told you this before, Philly, but I was introduced to TM meditation just before the lockdown started. And as much as I don't do it religiously anymore, at that point I was doing it twice a day, every single day. And it was one of those days when everything was going wrong. My youngest, Sammy, was still in nappies at the time. I remember my husband had just nipped out. Everything was absolutely fine. So the kids were playing nicely. It was quite harmonious in the house. I said, I'm just going to jump on with Kira, who was my assistant at the time, not my podcast manager because there was no podcast. And as soon as my husband went out to go and get milk or whatever it was, it all just escalated very quickly. The parents listening to this will know how quickly that this can unravel.
Oh, it does, really fast.
Oh my God. So within a few minutes, I'm doing this Zoom call. Sammy has ripped his nappy off. There's poo everywhere. He's running around the kitchen, touching everything. Poo handprints all over the wall. I'm chasing after him. Because I'm chasing, he thinks it's a game.
It's a game.
So he's going faster and faster. And he grabs onto my really expensive glass lamp that's in the corner, pulls it over, smashes into a million smithereens.
Oh
and
God.
by the time my husband walked in 3 or 4 minutes later, I'm just sort of laid on the floor, glass everywhere. The kids are all locked in another room. And I'm going, I can't do this anymore. And that was the moment he says, right, you need to go upstairs and you need to meditate. I'm going to sort this out. I went up, and during the TM meditation, it just came to me to, it wasn't actually a podcast at the time. It was a series of Facebook Lives, which I called the Sunday series initially. But it came to me through this meditation. And as soon as I'd finished my meditation, I started firing off some voice notes to people that I wanted to interview, because I knew that if I didn't do it there and then, I would back out of it. So I was really holding myself to account. And every Sunday night, with a glass of wine at the time, I don't drink alcohol anymore, but every Sunday night I was there interviewing whoever it was, an entrepreneur or a business person. And I was there from the comfort of my own home, having these amazing conversations. And when the world started to reopen a few weeks later, 10 weeks later, that's when I kind of made the decision, right, do I continue down this path? Because so many people had said to me, look, I really feel like you've found your vocation, your mission in life. And that's where the podcast was born. If I'm honest, Philly, I didn't think anybody would listen to it.
And now you're in the top 0.05% and climbing. I mean, it's just crazy. Well, it's not crazy. It's a great podcast. But this wonderful, whole new world has opened for you. But the thing with all of this is it's not just a learning curve, like learning to use the tech and all of that shit, which I have found excruciatingly hard, but you learn so much. I am loving interviewing people and learning all the information and sharing it with anybody that will listen. And we're going to come and talk about that later, but I want to take you back now to, you just said that, you'd only been an entrepreneur for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And life had been very difficult for you earlier on than this, and when you had your children, and you'd suffered from postnatal depression, which is incredibly hard. I had a touch of it, nothing on your scale, but I had a touch of it with my youngest daughter, and it is incredibly hard. So can you talk us through that time in your life and how you were feeling, what was going on, how you were feeling, that you do lose your identity a little bit, don't you? Well, that's what happened for me. I lost my identity. So run us through what happened, love.
Well, it kind of started before then, and I know this podcast is all about wellness, so your audience will probably resonate with what I'm about to say. I was someone who's always been prone to depression, or certainly that's what I was led to believe. And back in 2006, my husband and I were in our early 20s. We were young and full of the entrepreneurial spirit, but that's about as far as it went. We didn't have a great deal about us in terms of knowledge or experience, but we did what all self-respecting budding entrepreneurs do, and we sat there and Googled get rich quick and decided we were going to become property multimillionaires, which, to be fair, back at that time, you could literally buy a property and refinance it the same day. It was an incredible time to be in the real estate industry. So we were sold a dream. We were sold to very unethically by a local property developers. A property that we purchased for 125 grand was meant to be worth 200 grand. And long story short, the development was flooded. It took years to complete. By the time it was finally done, it was mid 2010 and we were smack bang in the middle of a global recession. A property that was promised to be worth 200 was suddenly worth 60,000. And
Gosh.
yeah, we had something like 6 weeks at one point to come up with a £45,000, or we were going to renege on our contractual obligations. They were going to come after us for everything that we had, which was very little at that point. It was a couple of second-hand cars and a property that was probably worth about 80 grand. But for a young couple in their 20s, we'd never really experienced that level of stress before. I also worked in the prison service. I was getting very badly bullied at work and everything just compounded, and I pretty much had a mental breakdown. I was signed off work with stress. I went to the doctors and I had very little knowledge or insight into anything to do with natural health at that point. And like a lot of doctors do, I was encouraged to take antidepressants, which I was more than happy to take. So for best part of a decade, I was on all sorts of heavy duty medication, like really heavy duty. It used to get to a certain time of the night and it was like somebody just flicked a switch. My sex drive completely went, my motivation for life went. I became very negative, pretty lethargic, but this was all happening so gradually that I didn't really notice it. It wasn't until years later when I actually came off the medication and I started to reflect that I realised what an adverse effect it had on my physical health and actually my mental health as well. So if you fast forward to 2016, we managed to somehow complete on this property deal. But I went back to the comfort and security of a 9 to 5. I didn't want any stress. I'd never had any aspirations to be an entrepreneur really or a business owner. And it was 2016 when my husband's electrical business hit some very serious financial problems. A national construction company that we got all our work from went under, and they owed us a significant amount of money. They owed us about 70 grand, which was a game changing amount for us.
Yeah.
We knew we weren't going to get paid, and my husband and his business partner actually made the decision to get a bank loan to pay the 18 staff that we had working for us, knowing that that decision could cost us our business. Now, we managed to hang in there by the skin of our teeth, but we were left in a serious pickle financially, and it was a horrible, horrible time. I don't know if any of your listeners have been through anything similar, but I won't wish it on my worst enemy. It was a situation where you're waking up having heart palpitations in the middle of the night, not sleeping properly, wondering if you're going to be able to keep a roof over your head. Now, during that time, I was pregnant with my second daughter, Isabella. My husband, because of the nature of the situation we were in, was out on site 18 hours a day. He'd been behind a desk for years up until that point, but it was all hands on deck. And I'm in and out of hospital, still trying to look after my eldest daughter as well. Signed off work for the whole duration. They actually thought I had Crohn's at the time, but I think it was probably just all stress related.
Well, everything comes down to stress, really. You know, that's the body holds the score. You know, that's what it does. So an absolute terrible time. There must be people that are listening to this podcast now. You know, we've going into another global recession, and you know, a lot of people are struggling. You know, the effects of COVID and the lockdowns have absolutely taken their toll on people's businesses. So, you know, thank you for sharing that. But carry on the story of where it went from there, please, lovely.
Yeah, so, God, I mean, you couldn't have made it up. I'm a great believer in the law of attraction and being the energy that you want to attract. And that was kind of happening, but not in a good way at that time. The shit just kept on coming. So we held on to our house by the skin of our teeth. We held on to our business, but the stress was absolutely incredible. And I remember saying to my husband, look, you need to come back. You need to look after me. They're not going to discharge me from hospital because I'm at high risk of miscarriage. I kept collapsing and blacking out, which obviously when you're pregnant is even more serious. I said, you know, how will we know if anything's happened to me because you're in a different city and obviously you're not checking in on me every 15 minutes. And he's like, I remember him saying to me, Ellie, if I leave site now, the business is going to collapse. I said, well, if you don't come home, I'm probably going to have a miscarriage. So, choose your poison. And my husband was in an awful situation. So,
I mean, that's a real rock and a hard place, isn't it?
yeah, it is, because obviously he wanted to be there. He's a, doting husband. He's a great dad. But that was the situation we were in at the time. And anyway, we had Isabella. She was born in the midst of all the chaos, and she was a little ray of sunshine in an otherwise very dark time. But I don't know if it was, in all honesty, if it was postnatal depression, pick your blend of depression. We were under such a huge amount of pressure. I'd battled with mental health for years. I was still on the heavy duty medication throughout the pregnancy because
Oh my God, were you?
yeah, I was. And I was under the top consultants at the time, and they said because of my health problems and because of my mental health challenges that this was by far the best thing to do for for the baby and for the pregnancy. Now, bearing in mind I was at a very different point in my life as well, it didn't really occur to me to ever challenge authority or, who was I to second guess a consultant. So there was not one part of me that thought that this was an inappropriate thing to do. But yeah, I was on all forms of medication, including quite a high dose of amitriptyline as well for sleeping. And yeah, so anyway, it was it was interesting times. And yeah, my husband's dad, my father-in-law Eddie, we found out that he had cancer, terminal cancer. Within a couple of months he was dead. My gran got a terminal diagnosis. My sister was sectioned under the Mental Health Act. All these things just kept on happening to us. And bit of a funny story. Permission to overshare.
Yeah, overshare. My God, because this is all sounding very tragic. So, and it is, it is. I mean, it's.
Hey, look at everyone's got a story though, Philly. I don't think I particularly had it any worse than anyone else, but this will make you chuckle. Because during that period, we all know how babies are made, don't we? But Isabella...
Not anymore, love. I think they've changed the rules on that, haven't they?
Oh my God, no, that's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast.
So we'd always planned on having 2 children. We had our 2 beautiful girls. The world's in complete chaos. Everything's just a whirlwind of disaster at that point. We have one little drunken mishap. My husband's actually scheduled for the vasectomy on the Monday. He's booked in for this snip. And on the Friday before, I found out I was pregnant with my 3rd and definitely final blue-eyed little boy, Samuel. And it was just one of those moments when I still remember it. I was in floods of tears. I was just thinking, are you fucking kidding me? Like, come on, universe. What else can you chuck at me?
What can you throw at me now?
What can you throw at me now? And I remember ringing my dad. And bearing in mind, everyone kind of knows I'm a bit batshit crazy at this point. And Isabella's there, still a newborn, 3 months old, still doing the sleepless nights and all that kind of thing. And just the normal hormones that us mums are dealing with at that point. And I rang my dad and I says, Dad. He's going, what's the matter, darling? I'm in floods of tears. I said, I'm having a baby. And my dad was just like, oh, darling, you've had the baby. And I'm going, no, this is another one. So yeah, that was quite funny. But anyway, I went on to have my beautiful little boy, and what a blessing it is. We were just chatting about this as well, and the universe had knew what was best, and oh my goodness, he's literally the apple of my eye. So it's the best thing that could have ever happened. But during that period, this is a really long-winded answer, I've just realised, but I was basically made redundant whilst I was still on maternity leave, but I couldn't stand my job anyway. It was just basically paper pushing. It went from being a job where you were making a real impact, rehabilitating prisoners and helping them resettle back into the community, to just a tick box exercise. As with a lot of public sector, we were private sector, but working within the public sector, anyway, the prisons are a farce. But I was made redundant, and Yeah, ended up going back into property, but this time we decided to get ourselves educated and what have you. But yeah, my journey's not really about business because I truly believe that your business can only grow at the same extent that you do. And that's when I started to get into self development and mindset and start to take a bit more personal responsibility for my life and my actions and realize that no one was coming to save me. But actually, it wasn't until 2020 when all that got stripped away, when the podcast was inadvertently born, that I started to really look a little bit closer at the matrix and the infrastructure of how the world works and start to genuinely take an interest in things that really matter, the true definition of success, which is relationships, spiritual health, mental health, and physical health as well.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about the fact that you've said that you wouldn't interview, a big name who was kind of very newsworthy on the podcast just to get those headlines
No.
and those virals. So everybody you choose on your podcast is in an alignment with, most of them are in alignment with your beliefs.
Yeah.
You wouldn't. So you were talking earlier about, am I allowed to say
Oh,
this?
say the name,
About,
yeah.
yeah, about Andrew Tate.
Oh, yeah, you can say about him, yeah.
I mean, that's one that, there'll be a lot of people that go, why on earth would you interview a man like that? My youngest daughter being one of those people. Who would say, why would you interview that misogynistic bastard? So what is in the alignment? So, I said about, a big chunk of what they say is in your alignment. So it doesn't mean that everything they say is in your alignment. So what can you actually see in Andrew Tate that you align with?
Well, Zuby, a previous podcast guest of mine, said something that really resonated with me. He's like, you can take the meat without the bones. With people, you do not have to agree with everything that you say. But I think we're living in a world where it's very divisive and we're being set against each other. And actually, in terms of Andrew's worldview, do I agree with everything he says about women? No, absolutely not. And I'd love to challenge him in person around some of those points for sure, and a lot of other points as well. But in terms of what he's saying about the matrix, in terms of what he's saying about, the political infrastructure, the pharmaceutical infrastructure, and everything else, I think actually he's been a voice of reason, and he's also encouraging people, young men in particular, to look after their financial health, their physical health, their mental health. He's very anti drugs. He's very pro personal responsibility. So, yeah, I just think that this era of look at the people that are being allowed to remain on television. It's just absolute insanity, the hypocrisy, the double standards. We were talking about Twitter pre-Elon. The fact that you've got known terrorists, you've got members of the Taliban on there, but yet they're deplatforming people like Katie Hopkins or Donald Trump. And I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm pro or against those people. You can dislike what people say, but you can still respect their right to be able to say that. And yeah, I just think that actually we need to have a little bit more balance and to stop being so offended with one another if we're ever going to try to come to any sort of resolution, because we're feeding into what they want whilst we're all attacking each other about bloody rainbow flags or vaccines or whatever else, or it's not even about being pro Ukraine, it's just even challenging the sort of reasons behind the war. And I feel like no one's allowed to have an opinion now without being classed as far right. But equally, I see people on our side, and I don't, actually, that's quite divisive language, which I don't do intentionally. We're calling people sheeple because they're less awake. And I just don't see that that's how we're going to move forward as a society. I think we need to heal and we need to unite, and we need to stop being distracted from what's going on and unite against the common enemy.
I absolutely agree with you. And one of the things that I've found very challenging in the last 3 years is the amount of people that go, they're a shill, they're a, kind of controlled opposition, they're this, and it's just like, everybody's trying to do their best. And, you know, I'm going to come back to Andrew Tate for a little bit longer because, you know, he has a charge over his head at the moment for trafficking, sex trafficking. And, you know, we've got the Russell Brand situation going on at the moment as well.
I don't think he's actually got a charge. I don't know if they've charged him with anything, that thing, because I mean he was arrested, and he still got restrictions against him, but they've got
They haven't
absolutely
charged him.
nothing. They've got absolutely no evidence. There's no way that they wouldn't have pressed charges by now if they'd have had a scrape of evidence. It just seems like absolute insanity.
There does seem to be, you know, and the thing is that we don't know. We obviously have no idea what has happened with, you know, Andrew Tate, Russell Brand, Julian Assange. But if you take Julian Assange for a moment, I remember when he was first arrested for rape a long time ago, and I wasn't awake then. I wasn't down the rabbit hole. And so I just thought he was a really bad man that had gone and raped somebody in Sweden. That was terrible and he should be in prison. And then you kind of look at the work that he's managed to get out and you go, oh, could that be the reason why?
Yeah.
And, you know, again, there isn't a conviction there. This man is just being left to rot in a prison with America wanting him to be extradited.
Yeah.
And, you know, in America, I mean, well, it's kind of over here. The last 20 years of his life really has been over. Yeah. And we're losing freedom of speech at such a rapid rate. And, you know, if you can't speak your truth, you won't be healthy because you'll be bottling it in.
Have you heard that they've been rewriting Huberman's Wikipedia?
I heard something about that the other day, that they were doing rewrites on that Wikipedia to do with giving more prominence to women. So there's a big push apparently to be writing about women. I know, I mean, Wikipedia's written by members of the general public.
Yeah, but is it though? Because it's interesting now. If you write anything positive about Huberman, they've been evidencing this on video. It gets rewritten again within 15 minutes. So you can't tell me that that's just the general public. He is an esteemed neuroscientist, and now they seem to just be labouring the point that he goes on podcasts that are associated with misinformation, and they're just trying to discredit him on a professional level as well. And you just think, fucking hell. But, you know, going back to, you know, Assange and Tate, Brand, etc., I just think, isn't this horrendous that rape and sexual assault are being weaponised in this way when so many women, myself included, have had some really terrible experiences in the past? And like you said, we don't know. I think we're getting into very dangerous territory. For the record, my personal uninformed view is that these are matrix attacks. However, we don't know, and what a horrible situation for any genuine victim to be in when they're speaking their truth and not being believed because rape and sexual assault is being weaponised. And I think we are getting into murky territory now when potentially anyone who is awake or who's been outspoken against the current regime or the agendas, that they can now potentially hide behind the fact that the Matrix is coming after them if they do actually commit a heinous crime. So I don't think there's any winners from this at all. I think it's really terrible. And, you know, whilst I'm fairly certain, just based on, like I say, my own uninformed opinions, that these people are not guilty of what they're being accused of, ultimately we're never gonna know. I think the timing's very questionable.
I think the timing's questionable too, and you know, these people will not have a fair trial now. I mean, there's absolutely no way in a court of law that you can have a fair trial. And that worries me. I completely understand that, you know, I have this conversation with my daughter, and I've had attacks as well. You know, I think most women, shockingly, most women I know have had sexual attacks in their life. My first was at 15, and it's horrific. And I didn't tell anybody for years, but women don't have much of a chance if they go to the police. Police don't really. Well, I'm not going to say don't give a damn, but the system is set up against you, really, to get this to court, to get this, into a court. And so, my initial thing was they should have gone to the police. And my daughter pointed out and said, but you don't get that many convictions, mother. And it's like, no, that's very true. I have seen a lot of videos online. I don't know if you've seen any, but of women who have gone to bed with Russell Brand in his sex addict days, saying he treated me very nicely. We had a great evening. It was one-off sex, but he was lovely, very courteous. It was good fun. And you do have to wonder. I mean, they seem to be digging so hard. And we'll just never, ever know, really. And a court of law can't possibly ever answer this now. Now, I'm not saying that, it's right. Absolutely. It is appalling if any crimes have happened. He says that too. But we'll just never know. And without knowing, how do we take away people's livelihoods? And this is the next section that I want to come on to, because, we're both podcast hosts. Mm-hmm. It is incredibly difficult now to get information out.
Yes.
You've had, I've been taken down. You've been, have you been taken down yet?
Yeah. My original YouTube channel, like my Peter McCulloch interview on its own, had over 1 million downloads. It's quite soul destroying, really, when you're putting out powerful content that's got the ability to change life. That one particular video, out of all the videos that I've done, and I've interviewed some incredible people, as have you, was definitely the most impactful. I was literally getting hundreds and hundreds of messages from people thanking me, telling me that they'd not been able to get through to their family, or that they were on the fence themselves about the jab, and that they were, they'd never have another one, or their family are now awake, no longer going to have them. And I just really felt, again, the definition of success that we were talking about earlier. I felt like that was the first time that the podcast was really making a big impact, and I was contributing to the world. I mean, obviously, again, that's subjective. I had people telling me I was a murderer and everything else, which is sadly part of the territory these days. But at the moment, podcasting is still relatively uncensored. But you've got to look at what's happening elsewhere in the world. And Canada just this week have said that they're going to be clamping down on podcasts. And I do think it's inevitable. I've said that for a long time. I think we need to keep supporting alternative media, but it's challenging in itself. One, they're coming after Rumble, but also, I don't know about you, but I have tried on Rumble, but the algorithms are just not pushing my stuff out. Videos that were getting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube prior to being shut down were getting like 3 views on Rumble. So as a content creator, it's very difficult to put your time and energy and resources, financial resources, into a platform that's not giving you anything back. So Rumble, if you're listening to this, you need to support us. You need to give us a bit of something.
I completely agree with you. And, with what's going on at the moment, Rumble are losing a lot of sponsors. I believe HelloFresh have left them, and
Burger King.
Burger King. Well, we don't want that crap advertised. Having that fucking hell, Burger King. Yeah, I'm glad they're gone. But HelloFresh, but you think that these companies would just go, do you know what? They're standing up for freedom of speech. But nobody seems to want to stand up for freedom of speech. And before we know it, we will have completely lost it.
Yes.
And I don't know if we'll ever get it back if we lose it.
No, Jordan Peterson talks about this really eloquently. He's like, The things that are now acceptable to us would have just been inconceivable pre 2020. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? He said, you got this. If you want to know in a more articulate format, go and look up Jordan Peterson. But this is our line in this sand, this is our base point. And then we're getting pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed throughout the pandemic until people are like, no, we've had enough. There was protesting. People were starting to be more vocal on social media and they had to withdraw. So we went back. But you never fully go back to where you've started from.
No.
You don't go back to that starting point. So this is your new baseline. And then they start again and they're pushing to see how far they can take you until people say, nope, enough is enough. We're not going to accept any more lockdowns. We're challenging the mask mandates, whatever it may be. People's livelihoods are being affected too much. There's too much civil unrest. And they go back. But again, they don't even go quite. So now you've got another base level, but it's been so gradual that suddenly you're in a point where you're actually quite far removed from where you were 2020, but you're actually grateful for it as well.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the old own nothing and be happy. People are just then grateful to be able to go for a walk with their neighbour or to be able to stop at the country pub and order a pint. And,
And then when you had 6 people sitting outside a restaurant having, only in fresh air having a meal, you were, ecstatic. And it's just like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
It's
like that Stockholm syndrome a little bit, isn't it?
It is. Exactly that. And I was talking to somebody, actually, I won't name who the person is, but somebody that I really respect in natural health. And she was at home and she said, I've got COVID.
How the fuck does she know that?
That's what I said. And she said, well, I tested. I said, why the fuck would you do that? She said, well, I had to treat a pregnant woman, so I thought I should. And I had a wedding that weekend. And she said the client that she was treating, actually, she said, I can't see you, I've got COVID. She went, and this client was pregnant, so, she was kind of going, and the client said, don't worry, I had it last week, it's fine. And then she phoned her friend at the wedding and said, I can't come to the wedding. She went, don't be so fucking stupid. Of course you can come to the wedding. Just don't dance with my granny or something, And this does not stop until we stop it. Till we stop the testing. People are wearing masks again. And, even the Daily Mail has been doing articles on masks about how, they're bad for your health and we're inhaling plastics. And, this
about our poor ocean as well. Oh my goodness.
I know. And it's just like, they've tried to cut back on straws, plastic straws and plastic bags. And they've been handing out billions of masks for the last 3 years that don't work. There is tons of research on that. And they're all ending up in the landfill or the sea. Yeah. It is extraordinary.
Where's Greta now, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, well, she quite happily wore her mask. But, and we'll come on to climate change for a little bit, because I remember seeing a clip of her about a year ago being arrested at demonstration. Did you see this?
No, she winds me up. I can't watch anything with her in it.
So, well, they had her on the floor. They were arresting her in Germany, I think it was. And then there were other clips which were absolutely of her just standing there beforehand, and people had timers on their phones and everything. And she was standing there laughing and talking to the police. And then the next moment she's on the floor with her hands behind her back. And you just can't believe anything you're told out there anymore. It's quite extraordinary.
Yep.
We're going to come back to the podcast now, your podcast, for a little bit. And I just want to ask you, we talked about Canada and the future of podcasts and are we going to get censored? Where do you see your future as a podcast host getting out this information? it's becoming increasingly hard. We've got the online harms bill, which, you know, if you'd like to talk us through that a little bit. We've got the new regulations with YouTube that, you know, I keep going on about because, you know, it's bad enough on YouTube anyway, getting any information out. Where do you see your role trying to help people and communities find out the truth about what's going on in the world?
It's quite difficult because I talk a lot about authenticity, but it's very difficult to be your authentic self online because, as you know, you just get shadow banned, you just get deplatformed. You know, I've had the messages when people want to follow me on Instagram with the warning and things like that. I've seen my reach go. Some of my posts on LinkedIn, well, my average post on LinkedIn used to get hundreds of thousands of views per post, and now they probably get 3 or 4 thousand views. So the difference in terms of my reach is quite staggering. Now, if I was using social media to promote my other businesses, which I have done historically, then they've just cut off my source of income. But we've had to get creative. And you know what's really interesting, Philly, is I think that as much as my definition of success is not solely around money, I think at this point in my life it's actually featuring quite high up there because one, I think we need to realise that I think everyone listening to your podcast understand that the establishment don't have our best interests at heart. We all need to, as much as is physically possible, try to mitigate against that as much as possible and build a bit of a war chest for what may or may not come. But for me, my own personal missions evolved as I've evolved over the last few years, and I want to start pumping money from our other businesses into alternative media so I can start recording more docu-series, long form content. I'd like to create my own independent media company. I'd love to be able to fund and contribute towards documentaries like First Do No Farm. We've both had Dr. Azim Malhotra. Films like The Sound of Freedom
Sound
that
of Freedom,
Angel
yeah.
Studios has just done, which was financially backed by people like Mel Gibson and Tony Robbins. And the reality is, in order to make an impact, you do, well, not solely, you don't solely need to have money. Everyone can make an impact. But in order to really make a significant change in the world, we are going to need to build alternative systems. I mean, we were talking, just going off in a little bit of a tangent, but we were saying, what do we do if one of us has a car accident tomorrow? We need a blood transfusion. Now, you said something that was really powerful. You said that you'd rather die and that you've informed your family rather than having a blood transfusion. Well, I absolutely don't want to have a blood transfusion with vaccinated blood, but I've also got 3 young children and that are, you know, I want to be there to see them growing up. God forbid, what if one of my children needs a blood transfusion? Like, these are quite serious questions. So we need to build a whole new infrastructure. That's not just a case of, you know, I'm a property developer as one of my many hats. It's not just a case of acquiring a building and getting some doctors. It's like, how do you actually sustain a hospital and all the things that come with that? I mean, it's a whole minefield when you start exploring it, which I have explored it with people like Dr. Peter Chan and other people that are keen to build this whole alternative space. So I do think that we're going to need money. So one of my big priorities at the moment is building up. We've had a few knocks recently. The pandemic's brought some of our businesses to their knees, but you know, equally, there's a lot of opportunity out there. My husband's now down a whole rabbit hole with trading and cryptocurrency. There's massive opportunity in that space. And my intention is to use that capital to really try and build a bit of an alternative to media. But, you know, it's not a one-woman operation. I think that it's going to take a concerted effort from a lot of people.
This is what concerns me because you've seen really big names like Rumble, brand YouTube has got badly hacked and had to do a rebrand. Is it 1VS now, brand YouTube, and you know, and brilliant journalists, you know, like Sonia Poulton, Sean J. Ward, you know, doing the Rise Breakfast show. There are some great people out there doing all the work they can to get information out. but it's going to take an awful lot before we can actually build our new systems. And, you then asked me about the blood transfusion, and for me, it's a no-go. But there are blood banks being worked on with unvaccinated blood. They are coming. But for me, you said, what would happen if it was your children? And I said, my children would want the blood transfusion. So they must be allowed to have it. And that's absolutely fine. But it's an individual choice.
We don't have the choice to get the unvaccinated blood at the moment, though. That's a problem. And even with these blood banks, are they going to feed into your local NHS hospital? I mean, I don't think that's going to be allowed.
No, there was the very well documented case in Australia with the little boy, the baby, and the parents didn't want it. And they had hundreds of people offering to donate blood, and they weren't allowed. And it's a strange world that we live in, and it is incredibly divisive. And you and I aren't here today to divide people. And if people have the same opinions as us, fine. And if they don't, it's just maybe worth listening and
to a different podcast,
or go to a different podcast. Go and listen to Dr. Chatterjee. He won't say anything like this. So, but I do hope, and I do have great hopes for the future, because the world that we lived in pre-2020 could not really continue. It wasn't there. And we were having a discussion earlier about whether, it was actually just a little tester solution for AI. Now, you did, and I want to ask you about who was the guest you had?
Mo Gowda.
Yeah, Mo Gowda on AI.
Yeah.
How much of an eye-opener was that podcast for you?
Well, I mean, for anyone who doesn't know Mo was the ex-chief business officer, which is like the head honcho of Google X, which was at the forefront of their innovation. So he's a world-leading expert on the AI technology. But he actually left when he felt that the AI kind of got to the point where it was basically at no return. And AI, like anything, is neutral, but it's down to the people that are programming it that can, could be really used as a force for good. But unfortunately, we humans don't have the best track record. And Mo believes that AI actually presents the biggest existential threat to humanity that we've ever seen, more than climate change, more than COVID, more than the nuclear war, the potential of nuclear war or previous world wars. So it was a really interesting episode. And we're already seeing signs, that there's a lot of positive. It feels like I'm sort of focusing on the negative. I'm actually a really upbeat person, but if you play around with ChatGPT, you'll be able to see just how heavily influenced it is from the left at the moment. And certain words are forbidden, certain narratives are certainly promoted, and as much as I use it every single day in my business, and it is certainly makes us a lot more efficient and profitable and all of that kind of thing, I definitely see the darker side to it as well. Yeah, massively.
Yeah, we've been playing around with it recently, and you can ask it a question about natural health, and it says it doesn't have an answer to that. But we programmed in my book, the Natural Wellness Journal, the other day, and asked it to, I don't know how we programmed, because I didn't do it, but it got programmed, the Natural Wellness Journal, and then we asked it to write an answer in the style of Philly J. Lay, and it started coming back. So what we need to do, it's not going away, AI. This isn't like a fad like
No.
Knockers in the 1960s. This ain't going anywhere. It's not your bouncing ball. This is here to stay. And I do wonder if COVID was there to see how we react when we have nothing to do. Why they kind of said, well, let's just see what happens when we take away everything. It's a possibility. Like I said, we know jack shit now. We know nothing.
Well, I mean, I think if you listen to I'd encourage everyone to go and listen to the episode I did with Mo, because, like you said, it's such an eye opener. But the AI technology is already a lot more intelligent than humans. We are already at that point of no return. And when he talks about existential threat, it's not as in like a doomsday Terminator style scenario, which I think most people envisage, but you've got to realise the technology that runs the world. I mean, it was only a couple of weeks ago we were in complete meltdown because there'd been a glitch with air traffic control and things like that. The whole world can be brought to its knees.
Yeah.
Your gas supply, your electricity supply, your food supply, your ability to be able to travel, your traffic lights, your infrastructure, everything would crumble within a matter of days, if not hours. It's yeah, obviously you've got potential threats, nuclear wars and things like that. But actually, if you listen to Mo, the threat's not necessarily where most people perceive it to be. It's interesting.
Very interesting. Very concerning. I remember reading an article, and this is right back in the early days of AI. But in the days when I read papers, actually, and there was just a little snippet that came up that an AI soldier in Japan had gone AWOL in the lab and murdered, I think it was about 24 people that were working on it, We've seen little robotic dogs on the streets of New York.
Yeah.
The cops, the dog cops.
Yeah.
I saw a little bit of footage from New York today with robots coming down the escalators.
New York's fucked, isn't it? What's happened to New York?
I don't know. But it's you can say that about a lot of countries. I mean, I never thought in a million years I would think what I think now of Canada.
I know.
Or New Zealand. I mean, there's a lot of countries that, it's tragic. France.
Yeah.
At least the French people get out there on the streets, though. They do love a good riot.
Yeah.
And, a revolution.
They didn't have a revolution, though, did they? They had some marches, but they didn't.
No. But the French Revolution,
Well, yeah.
So
let them eat
they're not,
cake.
yeah.
They're not. Let them eat bugs.
Oh, God, let them eat bugs. Oh, my God. Yeah, no, there was something up on social media the other day. No, it's actually... It came up on my phone on the news. I don't read the newspapers, but there was a banquet with all the heads of state and loads of people.
That, yeah.
And the sheer opulence of this, when so many people in the world are starving.
Yeah.
And, and somebody put it up on Twitter, that's where I saw it, and said, caption this. And I said, let them eat cake. It's just like, come on, France, we need you to do this. Now, nobody in France will be able to watch this episode. They might be able to hear it, but they won't be able to watch it because it's going up on Rumble, and Rumble's banned in France.
What about people like Leonardo DiCaprio and Taylor Swift? These people that are just constantly on their private jets. So Leonardo is at the forefront of telling us all what we shouldn't do in terms of climate change, as he is chartering big luxury mega yachts. He's getting his private jet to his mega yacht, and then he gets his helicopter to land on the helipad to take him out to dinner. Like, this isn't bullshit. This is actually happening. And he actually has the audacity to tell us that we should be limiting our travel. I'm like, I've been quite shocked at the amount of celebrities that have... I understand because of the level of propaganda that everyone's endured. We've never experienced anything like this, certainly in my lifetime. So people who legitimately believed that they were doing the right thing by endorsing the jab, rightly or wrongly, I can understand their position. And I think, as I said earlier, we need to have compassion in order to move forward. But there's been a lot of people who have sold their soul to the devil for the shiny penny. And, God help them. I'm a believer in karma. And
I'm a believer in karma too.
You've got people like Michael Phelps, Pink. I mean, oh my God, I love Pink's music. I've been to so many of her concerts. She's absolutely amazing. And she's there massively endorsing Pfizer. And I just think, wow, these people genuinely...
Adele was another one. I mean, I loved
yeah.
Adele. And I went to what ended up was supposedly going to be her final concert ever at Wembley. And I went on the Wednesday night, this is about 4 years ago, on the Wednesday night, and she was closing on the Saturday, but then she became ill with a cold, flu, couldn't do the rest of the shows, and she said, I'll never come back. COVID hit, so she's like, I'm coming back, but you can only come to my concert if you've had an injection. And it's just like, how dare you? Mm-hmm. How dare you tell people they need an injection?
And the Foo Fighters?
It got cancelled because everybody had COVID.
Yeah. But they wouldn't let anyone in that was not vaccinated. You know, you're just like...
So who wouldn't?
The Foo Fighters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there has been so much shaming.
Sean Penn.
No.
So Sean Penn, ironically, so one of my podcast guests messaged me to say that he was at the Cannes Film Festival, and Sean Penn had came up to him and said, I was watching you on the Other Mission podcast. And I was just like... So it's this podcast guest was really excited that Sean Penn had, like, watched the episode and things. And I was just like... You know, he's sort of saying, do you want me to connect you with him? I was like, I'd rather douse myself in acid, thank you.
That's such a great line. Would you like me to connect you? I'd rather douse myself in acid, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Love it. It's been a strange old time. It has been a strange old time. And
it's interesting though, Philly, because do you not think, this was, again, one of my previous podcast guests, Zuby, had said this, everyone likes to think that they would have been the person that stood up against the Nazis during the 1940s in Germany. And I think the last 3.5 years has shown us that, no, actually, you wouldn't have been. The vast majority of you really wouldn't have been. And people like Piers Morgan and other vocal journalists that are putting things out there and saying, the unvaccinated shouldn't have the right to work, they shouldn't have the right to join in with mainstream society, they shouldn't be allowed to mingle with the rest of us in restaurants. I think they need to be held to account. It's okay saying a few years later, oh, well, I was just going on the information that was provided, perhaps I was wrong. Well, that is, firstly, it's just totally not acceptable. That's not what I call a grovelling apology. But for me, the more concerning thing, going back to the Nazi Germany reference, is, isn't it interesting to see how people, how quickly they crumble in terms of their own values? Yeah. We obviously know it was 100% unjustified. The Holocaust was absolutely...
disgusting beyond belief.
There's not even words.
There aren't words for the
There really
Holocaust.
isn't words for it. But so many people in Germany at that time believed that the Jews were substandard humans. They were vermin. They weren't entitled to the same rights as everyone else.
It wasn't just the Jews, it was the blacks, it was
the gypsies, it was people that had mental health, physical health.
Yeah, I mean, there was a whole gamut that they were coming for.
But isn't it interesting, though, that those same people who have so much compassion, quite rightly so, for the genocide, for the atrocities that we saw in the 1940s, were calling for us to have our rights stripped away because they believed that the ends justified the means, and this wasn't a normal set of circumstances. So yeah, I think people really need to take a deep dive onto who they are as humans in terms of their values. And I think equally it's important for us to try and have compassion and to rebuild bridges.
Yeah, this is definitely a moment in history that it's never been more important to build those bridges. I mean, I know that I've fallen out with a lot of my friends and family, and it's been a challenging few years, but we're going to struggle to get the information out because of the situation that we're in now. But I know that, for one, Ellie McKay, you are absolutely a woman on a mission. Tell everybody where they can find all of your podcasts. And what I want you to do is, give them any information that they can find you in case you're not there. So web page. So if you go and look Ellie McKay up on YouTube and she's not there, go to your web page, because you've got your podcasts up on your web page as well, haven't you?
We will have within the next couple of weeks. It's
Lovely.
just getting revamped at the moment. So probably by the time this goes live, we'll be back up and running. We're on all the major platforms. We're on YouTube as well for the less, in quotation marks, controversial topics. But yeah, you'll find me on all the social media channels as well. I'm on Instagram mainly, LinkedIn, Twitter.
And it's Ellie. So you've got two handles. You've got Ellie McKay Official, and then you've got the
On a Mission.
On a Mission.
Yeah. Heavily shadow banned, so give us a follow.
Yeah, you have to go right through to the last letter, and then it says, "Are you sure you want to follow this person?"
It does. It's interesting that the podcast is literally getting hundreds of thousands of downloads, and then you put a clip out on Instagram and it's getting like 2,000 views. It's very interesting. There's such a disconnect, isn't there? Matt Letizia, another previous guest of mine, had said that if you were to just follow him on social media on Twitter, you would think that 80% of the population are really against him and they think he's a tinfoil hatter. But actually his real world experience is very different to that. He just walks down the street and he's just constantly approached by people that want to shake his hand and thank him for being a voice of reason in these crazy times. And actually that's the experience that we're getting on audio. It's just very interesting that you can have one of the top 10 podcasts in the UK, yet you've only got 28,000 followers on Instagram. There's a massive disconnect there.
Yeah, there is. But we'll keep fighting the good fight, getting out as much information as we can, keeping the voice of reason.
Keeping it real.
Keeping it real. Absolutely. It has been a complete joy to have you here, Ellie. And just thank you for speaking up and getting out all the information that you do. One hell of a special lady. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Philly. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.